Let's take a look at what's big in regards to matters debt. And Kenya is set to increase its borrowing limits after the National Treasury, in a proposed amendment, made public of plans to review the borrowing limit at 55% of the gross domestic product. With a ballooning public wage bill, Kenya's national debt has equally been ticking upwards, a development that continues to elicit public uproar on the government's insatiable appetite to borrow to finance infrastructure. In the proposals by Treasury seen by the Economy Desk, they reveal that the National Treasury is plotting to bypass MPs in its borrowing plans through proposed changes to the Finance Act. Treasury will now shift to an anchor of 55% of gross domestic product (GDP) in net present value terms, as opposed to the current case where Treasury is barred from exceeding the 9 trillion shilling ceiling that it has set under its debt ceiling. And the Exchequer might have the window to overborrow as long as it gives Parliament a plausible explanation. Some of the reasons that it might offer include depreciation of the shilling, unexpected spending due to unforeseen factors such as drought or pandemics by end of 2021. Kenya's public debt stood at a whopping 8.2 trillion shillings, and of course we have more on this. All right, why is debt an important issue? Let's walk you down some interesting numbers that we have put together. Well, the country's national debt has been growing, and let's take you down memory lane. During President Mwai Kibaki's tenure in office, he left public debt at 1.9 trillion shillings. This is as of June 2013. Come President Uhuru Kenyatta's reign, he grew the debt nearly threefold in 2 terms in office, which his second term is almost coming to a close. And President Kenyatta grew the national debt by a whooping 6.3 trillion shillings. Yes, 6.3 trillion shillings. And the public debt is now at a whooping 8.2 trillion shillings. Well, how is this debt being a big issue? The debt ceiling. This is basically the limit that we can take up as a country. Kenya's debt ceiling was raised from 4.5 trillion shillings, and Parliament approved a ceiling to be at 9 trillion shillings. And what has this debt been going towards? Majorly, it has been going towards investment. President Kenyatta increased spending on infrastructure, including the LAPSSET project, which is the Lamu Port South Sudan Transport Corridor. We also saw enormous expenditure on standard gauge railway and, of course, the road infrastructure in the country. All right, that's a quick look at the numbers. We now want to stay on this unfolding report on Kenya's proposal to amend the classification of her debt. And we are joined live in studio with our senior business writer, Dominic Omondi, and Victor Tieno, founder of Vifa Consult, who will be joining us virtually. Great to see you this morning, Dominic. And I know you want to take us through some class this early morning on matters debt. I hand this over to you. Please, educate us. Kenyans are asking, the Treasury is looking to have the debt to be classified as a percentage of GDP. What does this mean, Dominic?
Well, it's a bit technical, and perhaps it needs people who've been in an economic class or finance class. But basically, what this means when they talk of the present value or net present value terms, it's what finance experts will tell you, that money today is more than money in the future.
In the future.
And this is something that can be taken up even for you individually when you go to the bank and borrow some money. What you look at is how are you going to pay this money? Are you safe in terms of your capability of paying? One of the things that you have to look at is what we call real interest rate. Yeah. So real interest rate means that you adjust the interest rate for inflation, for increase in prices.
Yes.
Because if prices keep rising more than, if the prices rise more than your interest rate, and your interest rate is constant, then it means it won't be hard for you, you know.
All right.
However, if the real interest rate rises, you know, and your income is not rising, then it means that you are going to pay more. So basically, to calculate real interest rate, you subtract inflation rate from the nominal interest rate, the interest rate that you're given by your bank, whether it's 10%, and then you subtract inflation rate, let's say it's 7%. So in the case of debt, what is important to look at is debt service. All right. As opposed to economists say, don't be so much obsessed with the ratio of debt to GDP, but look at whether going forward, looking at interest rate, looking at things like the exchange rate, we are going to be able to pay the debt that we have. All right. So let's just take us through some class, Dominic. Yeah. A small calculation here. So let's say you have...
Let me come this way so that I can get a better glimpse of the same. Well, we are doing some class this morning on what this whole debt issue means. Dominic, so take it away.
Let's say, personally, you've taken a debt of, let's say you're supposed to pay 100 shillings. Yes. I don't know whether this is... the interest rate that you're given is, let's say, 6%. Yeah, 6%. Yeah. Inflation rate at the time of taking the loan is, let's say, 5%.
You need to inscribe harder. We barely see your...
I'm afraid that perhaps I can knock down this board, so that's why.
Not really.
So
we
have the...
Just carry on. Start off from here.
So we have 100. And then interest rate is, let's say, 6%. Yeah, and inflation rate is 5%. So this means that your real interest rate by then, by the time that you're taking the loan, is 1%. It's just 6 subtract 5, and then you get 1%.
All right.
Yeah. So that is your real interest rate. The idea is for this interest rate not to keep going up, because if it goes up, it means that your debt burden will get heavier.
All right. Interesting.
You know? And so. You need to look at a country's inflation rate, for example. You know, you need to look at your inflation rate. If inflation it keeps going up, it means that in the future, your burden will get heavier. So let's say in the future, and we are assuming that the interest rate doesn't vary. Yeah. Yeah, it's 6%. Yeah. You know, even in the future, you'll pay 6%. However, your inflation goes up to, let's say, 7. Yeah, 7. Yeah. So you subtract 6 from 7, it's negative.
Negative 1.
So, in terms of have I interchanged things? In terms of payment, if you are paying, yeah. Then it has gone down. It's reduced.
Point noted. Thank you.
It has reduced. Okay. I think if I've confused you a bit there.
Let me allow you to do some of the arithmetic as we also engage Victor Otieno, who is also standing by just to take part in this conversation. Victor, if you can hear me, good morning and great to see you on this day. As we continue this conversation, public debt, I just want to hear your thoughts, especially what does this mean to the small and medium-sized businesses where they are a majority of the economy who have been locked out technically in terms of accessing cheap credit?
Thank you very much, Abi. I think from an SME perspective, two things are of major concern when you look at public debt. Number one is the more government is tied up in terms of public debt. Let's assume that towards debt, goes towards paying recurrent expenditure, and the balance of government uses to in the economy in terms of stimulating the economy, investing in SMEs, creating a conducive business environment. The question is how effective would be the 20 shillings that remains towards stimulating the entire economy to be able to pay 60 shillings. So that is the challenge that we face in terms of resource allocation towards the productive sectors for them to be able to grow and contribute towards socio-economic development. Number two is, when government borrows, especially locally, it means that a lot of small businesses are locked out from accessing credit, given that, based on the risk profile, it is easier and cheaper to lend to financial institutions to lend to government as compared to small businesses. So those are the two major challenges that we see from an SME perspective.
Interesting that you bring this up, Victor, and we are, of course, looking at another budget cycle coming up in a few weeks now. We are targeting to see the national budget being tabled in about April there, if not end of March. Absolutely. And for you, what would really stimulate economic activity over and above cheap credit?
Yeah, so the challenge in terms of our budget cycle has been the lack of a clear evaluation framework. So before we go to the budget, of course, the National Treasury presented the budget policy statement, which had proposed a third cycle of stimulus program towards private sector as well as other sectors. The question that we still have is we've not received a report on the effectiveness of the first and second SME. And why I raise this is because if you look at the reality on the ground in terms of how SMEs are, a majority of them being informal, and the nature of interventions in terms of stimulus program, there's a mismatch. If you have an economy that is a highly gray economy, a lot of informal activities going on, vis-a-vis interventions that are geared towards a formal economy. So there's a mismatch. So we needed to see a report on how effective has this been. Have the strategies been put towards supporting SMEs in the first stimulus program, the second one, and even the economic stimulus post-COVID-19 economic strategy? We haven't seen a clear report on the same. Now we are going on another budget cycle with a focus on the third stimulus program as well as Big Four agenda, without having evaluated the previous two cycles. So even before we start evaluating this, we have pending issues that come from prior years that needs to be checked before we can even start looking at how effective or how much is going to be allocated towards SMEs.
All right, thank you so much, Victor. And let me come back to our class here with Dominic. And Dominic, you've taken us through a very interesting model in terms of the formula that we use to get to the net present value. And for the ordinary Kenyan watching and listening to us this morning is asking one simple question. Will this affect them, and in which way? By us reclassifying our debt, and will it go through Parliament?
Yeah, there is that small hurdle as to whether Parliament will play ball. Mm-hmm. And that is up to them. They need to look at the merit of the bill and decide whether it is in the interest of the people or not. But looking at what net present value means, debt in itself, they say, is not bad. Mm. And as long as it's used well, you build roads, you build railways and all that, as long as these are revenue-generating activities that will boost the economy, then there is no problem with it. And talking of net present value, it is in the interest of National Treasury to ensure that the stock of public debt consists mostly of concessional loans.
Exactly, concessional.
Now, if you have concessional loans, these are loans that have very low interest rates. Mm-hmm. Their repayment period is much longer. They have a longer grace periods, and they tend to come with a grant. So when you look at going forward, will we have a problem paying this loan? Then you start seeing what it is meant by net present value. If you have so much concessional loans, it won't be a burden to taxpayers in terms of so much money being used to pay interest. Interest on loans, like the case is the case with commercial loans such as Eurobonds and some of the Chinese loans, which are mostly either commercial or semi-concessional.
And Dominic, I'd like you to just clarify something for us. We've seen number upon time, wherever the debt conversation comes, we are always reminded that Kenya's debt to GDP ratio is not that high. We are at almost 60%. There are countries like Japan which are at over 200%.
Yes.
And this brings us to what you're talking about, the concessional issue.
Yes. So the problem that we had, especially in the last 9 years, is our uptake of very huge non-concessional loans, commercial loans, where you've taken the loan today, and with no, in a few months' time, you started paying interest rates, even before the loan you've taken has helped you to generate something that will help you to pay the loan. And so, even if your debt to GDP is as low as 55%, and you are taking up loans that are maturing very fast, it puts pressure on you because you have not created enough money to enable you to pay the loans. Secondly, you've taken loans mostly in foreign denominated loans like the Eurobonds, and most of the Chinese loans are denominated in dollars. Okay. And so if you look at the way the shilling has been behaving, currently it's at 114. That 114 that you're seeing there means a jump in the stock of external loans. Wow. In Kenyan, in local currency terms. Amazing. So that means you paying more, taking more shillings to convert them into dollars so that you can pay that money.
Awesome, awesome. Thanks for that explanation. Well, that has been our morning session here on Business Cafe, and I hope we've broken it down for you, because we're simply saying taking a loan at a commercial bank vis-a-vis taking a loan via a SACCO. Equating this to Kenya, Kenya is now taking an approach where we are taking concessional loans, which are way more cheaper compared to commercial loans. The same equivalent applies. If you take a loan with, say, a SACCO, the interest rate will be slightly better than when you take with a commercial bank. Well, that's where we bring it to a close this morning. It's been a pleasure breaking this down for you. And remember, at 3 p.m. we still have Business Day coming up. Have a lovely morning, and adios.